to Jills of All Trades podcast. I'm Cinnamon with countrycraftswood.com.
And I'm Julianne with dirtpatchheaven.com with one H.
All right, so we both had a scripture we wanted to share. I'll go ahead and start. Mine's from Galatians 6:7. It is, "Be not deceived, God is not mocked. For whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap." The reason why I wanted to talk about that, or I use that as my scripture, is because my mom is a very big preacher on that. So she'll be like, if I don't have time for something, what I do is I invest time on stuff, because whatever you sow, whatever you plant, you're going to get the same back, and even more so. So then you'll get even more time. Or if I don't have that much money, I will give it to somebody, like do donations or, invest. I'll sow a good seed that way, and then God will give it back, So she was constantly going over that and teaching us that growing up. So I like to look at it as a positive, because it's both positive, and it does also keep your mind at ease. You have to make sure you look at if you're sowing anything bad also. Like if you're gossiping, you're going to get gossiped about. So whatever you do is going to come back to you. I also had one more verse, which was Matthew 6:1. It says, "Take heed that ye do not your alms or good deeds before men to be seen of them. Otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven." So when I was saying, you want to, whatever you sow, you reap, I was basically talking about also if you are doing a good deed. And then it goes with this verse saying, basically, if you do that good deed, you don't want to do it out in the open. Because if you're doing it in order to, okay, this is what I'm trying to say. On Facebook, I will see a lot of times where somebody will post what they did that was amazing, and they will tell everybody, and then they get a bunch of likes, which is awesome, but that's their reward. If they don't or didn't say anything about what they did, God would reward them so much bigger. So that was my verse.
I thought that was good. It was making me sit and provoke. It was provoking my thoughts. So, okay, so mine is Luke 14:28, and it says, "Suppose one of you wants to build a tower, won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have enough money to complete it?" And I think that not only goes for financial planning, but also just for everything in life. You sit and you think through who you choose to be your mate. You study it out in your mind, the pros and the cons of the person you're going to marry. You study out your pros and your cons of the job that you want, because you want to be married to someone who will help further your relationship with Christ. You want a job that will further your relationship with Christ. I really think that in everything we need to be mindful, and everything we need to kind of be wondering, how does this relate to my relationship with my Savior? Is what I'm spending this money on benefiting my fellow man? Am I and I think sometimes we have to be really careful in our choice of jobs. It's so easy to go out there and be like, well, this one is going to earn me more money, so this is the one I should go for. And I think to follow money, I don't know, who was it that I was talking to the other day that was talking about that, and about the way that your job can be an extension of your spiritual life. And it's like the parable of the talents, with burying your talents. It's not that God doesn't want us to have money. It's not that he doesn't want us to have purposeful work. It's that he wants all of that for us, and for it to strengthen our spiritual life rather than taking away from it.
Very good. That's a very good verse.
I thought so.
Just to kind of, talk about what happened in our gardening experiences. I will say that I had a conversation with Julianne about, saving money by having your own garden and everything. And we realized that we have we have a lot of yard and we're basically not using it. We already had, I think, a decent sized garden, and I came home from work and I knew that Derek was going to take the tiller out and he was going to, till a little bit more. And so I'm like, oh, okay. So I'm coming around the corner and I literally, my jaw dropped because I looked at where our garden was and it is 80 feet by 80 feet now. So it is 6,400 square foot garden. So that's what happened with ours. He went ahead and tilled that, and so I've been kind of looking at what we still have seeds for and what I think is actually going to get going. Because last year we actually had a really bad flood. It was over 2 hours I was pumping out our garden, and it kind of, I felt like a lot of the vegetables like stopped growing, and then some of them picked up. And I actually planted some seeds after we had that really bad flood. And everyone's like, why are you putting all that work into it? It's not going to grow in time. But I actually did. I got pumpkins. I had some decorative gourds that I gave my mom. There was beets. The two things I definitely wanted to survive didn't, which was fine, But so basically, this week, huge extensive garden. And on my way home from work, I always pass this one house, and they have this, life-size scarecrow that has his arm up and waving, and there's a huge garden behind it, and, small town, during voting season, when we go to the church to vote, Derek always strikes up a conversation with the, people at the table. And we learned that the people who live there are like a distant relative of Derek's, and we start talking about gardening because I talk about gardening to anybody who will listen. And he's like, "Yeah, you should just stop by. My parents would love to talk to you about gardening." I'm like, "Okay." So today, I got off work a little bit early, and I went over there, and then we started talking. They showed me around their garden and stuff, and I looked at my watch and realized I was there for an hour and 50 minutes, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have to get going. So I got a couple tips from them, which was really awesome. My in-laws totally surprised me, and after I went to go help a friend pick some strawberries, I came home and there were 16 tomato plants waiting for me, and so I went ahead and planted those. So I'm gonna have so many tomatoes, but I'm so excited because last year I planted basil, and I'm going to plant it, I've planted it this year too. And not only do I want to give those, to my chickens, but I also want to use it in all the tomatoes that we have so that I can make some spaghetti sauce. And the older woman that I actually visited today, she gave me a family recipe for spaghetti sauce, because I didn't have one, and I want to make spaghetti sauce because, I love spaghetti. I could eat spaghetti all day long. So that's where I am with my garden. How about you, Julianne?
Let's see. We're at the time of year where I start to give up just a little bit. Our weather suddenly starts to get dry, and unlike where you are, where rain, like water comes out of the sky, for us, water comes in these little canals, and that's they have curtailment on our water so that you can only pull a certain amount out of the ground. And so you flood irrigate, and this is the time of year where I'm flood irrigating the pasture, and I'm watering a garden here, and I'm watering a garden there, and I'm watering the trees, and I get to the point where I'm looking in 14 different directions to see who needs water now. And I've kind of come down to the realization that even though I feel like I just made a huge investment in watering, I need to make another investment in watering. In our area, it's just too dry. If you don't have some kind of automatic system for watering your garden, you're going to be out watering all day long. So I'm not happy about that realization. The straw bales worked so well up to this point, but they work best when you have extremely dense plantings, and because the shade holds the moisture into the planting medium. And I had to thin some things because they were starting to get a little cramped in there, and I couldn't get water in because the plantings were so thick. But now that I've thinned them, they're not as happy because now the water's being sucked out because the air is dry. And so it's this week is definitely a horror of watering situation, but it's for me, the gardening is the experiment. It's not necessarily about the yield, although it is about the yield and we get a yield. But for me, it's the experiment of how can I do it better this year than I did last year.
And I think you constantly, every year that you garden, you get better. The couple that I visited today, they're 81, and I said that actually today, and she's like, "Yep," and she can agree with that too. Okay, so this podcast we kind of wanted to talk about finances and stuff. So I'm just gonna kind of go over just a real quick, basically what my experiences with. Oops. I shouldn't have done that. It all started, basically the very first thing that I should not have done is I bought a brand new car. I kind of had the mentality that, I'm the youngest of 6 kids. I've always had everything passed down. The whole I deserve, a new car, something new, So I bought it with 4 miles on it. It was really expensive, but I was so happy to have it. And then after 2 deer, a girl and I both pulled out of parking lots opposite of each other. Mine was a little bit ahead. She had the right of way, but I didn't see her. She saw me. She tried to pass me. I hit her bumper, and luckily she did not tell the cops that she saw me and tried to pass me when they got there. So, of course, I was at fault. But anyways, so 2 deer, that accident, and a semi pulling out in front of me, which, thank the Lord, I was okay. The car was blowing out white smoke. So, same time, we had another vehicle, and the 2 of them together was just really, really expensive with insurance and the cost of it monthly. So we traded both of those in, took over a $10,000 loss, and got a new car because it would help us monthly. And that's a big thing too, which I'll talk about later on. But if you're looking at finances as can I afford it monthly, you're asking the wrong question. It's can you afford it at all? And I should have never gotten that car. But anyways, just, I've traded cars and stuff like that. I wasn't horrible with credit cards or anything because my parents actually wouldn't let me have a credit card even while I was in their house, and I moved out after I graduated high school. But my parents only had a credit card so that they could basically earn points on it. And then, so they would purchase something with the credit card and then they would automatically pay it off. And so even now they do that. So basically they don't get charged a dime in interest, but that credit card for a reward program actually gives them a $50 gas card. So it's actually paying them to use their card. So they're very, very smart with that. But I would get mail and it would be for a new credit card. And my mom, I'd see her go through the pile of mail and she's like, yep. And then she'd rip it up. Wouldn't even, she's like, don't ever fall into that trap. And I actually was a process server when I first moved to Texas. And so I served affidavits and subpoenas and, legal papers and stuff. And when I first started working there, the first month you didn't get paid. So any gas money, any food or anything like that when you're traveling, because you're traveling like 3-4 hours away in the sticks. And I had to get a credit card to put all that on. And then when I got my check, I needed it so bad for everything else that I didn't pay off that credit card. And then I had to do some balance transfers, which you think, you're saving money that way because there's no interest. But if you look at the fee by transferring it, it's just a whole big circle of, oh my gosh, what am I doing? So there's a lot of those things that now when I look at them, I think a lot of decisions was rushed. If it's ever like a deal that you absolutely have to do right now and there's no opportunity to even think about it, it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I think as a young person just leaving home for the first time, I can really, really relate to that. I never had any problem with credit card debt or any kind of debt. Everything that I owned was paid off. My trap became when I got married and I was an environmental Nazi. And so my husband had vehicles that were paid off that he used. He had a boat that he paid $500 for, and he'd fixed it and he owed no debt on it. And he had a little old truck to pay to pull it. And I looked at that truck and I thought about gas mileage and emissions and everything. And I said, honey, we've got to trade that in and get a newer truck because the emissions and the gas mileage and everything. And he really didn't want to. And it was one of those unwise wifely things where I should have maybe listened to my spouse a little harder. But I pushed us to get a new vehicle. And we owned the rest of our vehicles outright. But John had one car that he bought just as he met me because he felt like his older car didn't have very much chick magnet appeal. So, yeah, right? And it was a $6,000 car. It was used, but I had my car and it was paid off. So I said, let's go take the Sebring in and we'll trade it in and everything. And we went to buy a $7,000 Ford Expedition. It wasn't a terribly expensive car, but it was. I think at the time I was in school full time and he was making like under $30,000 a year. And so any kind of debt was kind of a silly thing to do when your cars were paid for. But we went in and when we signed the papers for it, the lady at the bank actually looked at us and said, this is a really stupid thing to do. Don't do this. I'm advising you not to take out this loan because we were in it. We were upside down by $4,000. So not only, and for those of you who don't understand that, because we didn't understand that at the time, what it meant to be upside down, it means that you're paying more for your vehicle than it's worth, and you could never resell it anywhere near that value. And so we ended up paying $11,000 for a $7,000 truck at the time that we just found out we were pregnant. We were barely married. I was going to school full time, and now we had added a car payment into things, and so. Like you were saying earlier about just the we have to do it now. I can't stop to think about this decision. It's always such a bad way to go about that. I don't think that's the way that God intends things. I really don't think he jumps things on us as opportunities. I think almost every time he gives us time to make these decisions and use our brains.
Exactly. Kind of want to talk about what we're doing now. To, I guess, so-called fix the things, maybe some new habits and stuff to think about. I guess budgeting. It's, it's kind of nice though, because if there's something that, Derek will be like, oh, can we get this? Or, hey, can we do this? Because now we've had, it helped our communication really well. A lot better when we started to do a budget, because if he would go and get gas and I hadn't transferred it from the business account after cashing checks and putting them, you have to put it into the business account for tracking and stuff, and then like transferred it over because we use our joint account or whatever, like if there wasn't any communication there, we could do it. Overdraft fees are just so unnecessary. And they hurt because you're like, oh, I don't get anything for that money. There's nothing tangible for that money. And that could have been $35 off of this total of my debt, and that I never have to pay again because it would have come off the principal or whatever. So anyways, our communication, got a lot better with a budget. So now, if there's something that he's like, hey, do you want to go do this? Or, hey, I'm not trying to make it sound like he's always the one that wants to spend the money. We kind of go back and forth, where there have been times where I'm like, you know what, let's do this. And he's like, no, we really shouldn't. And then I'm like, okay. Like we take turns. One of us is always the responsible one, which is really, really nice. If we were both, then there had been times in the past that we both, weren't very responsible. But I think we're definitely more aware of it now because we talk about it very often, and we're trying to have a good game plan and everything. But some stuff we do now is we try to keep our grocery costs low. We've started a garden, and he, being a meat and potatoes kind of guy, is actually looking into maybe expanding the different kinds of food that he eats. So maybe he can, use something from the garden. We are planning better for not making unnecessary trips. We live about 30-40 minutes away from like the main town that I work in and that he works in, and we get our groceries from. And so even though it's not the most convenient thing, if I've worked like 9-10 hours and we need groceries while I'm in town, I will go do it. It would be so much easier for me to be like, Derek, I'm so tired. I just want to come home. If you're off today, can you just make a trip and go get the groceries? Because after the 10-hour day, I have to go to the grocery store, pick everything out, load it in the car, come home, unload. You know what I mean? It's just, and any time that you are working hard to save money, it is not going to be convenient. It isn't. But if you don't look at it that way, if you look at more of, the benefits from it, it helps you get through it. So like, it was kind of a pain in the butt at first, but now I don't mind as much because I know it needs done. I don't go off of my feelings. I just go off of it needs to be done. And so if I'm in town, I'll go get groceries, or if I'm around this area, I'll go and do this errand. So we don't make any unnecessary trips. And then another thing we're actually doing is we're trying to concentrate on one bill at a time. Something that I used to do in the past, which I thought I was being good because I was paying a little extra, a little more than like the minimum that was due for a payment on everything. And if I would have taken all those little, things that I was paying extra on and just concentrated on one, it would have gone down faster. And then once that bill is paid off, I could have used that amount of money towards the next one, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think the thing that resonates with me the most about what you said is that that's exactly how we did it. When we initially had our debt, we had all of our debt except for our mortgage paid off within the first 3 years of our marriage. And that was making less than $35,000 a year. Again, I was in school full time, so that included my student debt. We paid cash for our babies when we had our babies. We had all of our vehicles paid off in that time. And the way that we did it is, like you said, it was the little things. The little things add up so quickly. Like you said, the grocery shopping of instead of having multiple vehicle trips. When I was even when I was a really young mother, I rode my bike as much as I could. I found a way to strap my baby's car seat to the bike trailer because they weren't safe just in the bike trailer. I had to like bungee cord the actual car seat in. And it was all about economizing on those pennies. I made my own laundry soap. What were some of the other things that we did? I kept chickens so that we could give them food scraps. And anytime any cash came into our home, like my grandma passed away during that time, and we got a few $1,000s as part of an inheritance, and all of that money went to pay off our vehicle debt. When I was finishing up with school, I went and worked an extra summer job to pay for my school. And I think the biggest thing that it came down to was, like you said, was groceries, because even with a really small family, oh my gosh, they add up so quickly. And I think the biggest secret for us was to buy in bulk and cook from scratch. It was that you could buy a 50-pound bag of oatmeal for $12 and it would last you for 6 months. You weren't buying the little containers of oatmeal. And so if a paycheck was a little bit short in a particular week or a particular month, you weren't going hungry, you didn't feel deprivation, and the thing that we have fallen into, and I don't know if it's a bad thing or if it's a good thing, is that kind of like what your parents did with the points on the credit card, is that what we ended up doing is that we've never made more than $40,000 a year. We never have. Always on one income. Sometimes I would work at minimum wage type jobs just because I didn't want to turn them into a career. I wanted to be home with my kids. And dang it, I forgot where. Oh, the credit card.
The
What it
credit
came
card.
down to was we had some things that could save us money by using some credit, like a wood burning stove, or when we found a car that was $2,000 that we knew that John would only need to put $2,000 into it and we'd have a running vehicle, we put that car on the credit card so that we would have a car that was running, that was big enough for our family, and then we paid it off really, really quickly. So I do feel like there is a place for credit, but I feel in my opinion, it really, really has to be something that for the least amount of money that you put in, it has to have a huge dividends that pays off instantly, not something that's way off in the future.
Right. Um, and when you were talking about buying in bulk and stuff like that, when you and I had a conversation the other day, um, you were talking about how you took money and went and got, several things from the bulk, in bought in bulk and stuff, and you guys did that instead of having a huge grocery bill. Um, just so the listeners know, every episode we're going to have a book, like a small book that they can purchase, that basically goes over the pointers and stuff like that. So I'm wondering if in the book, if you can maybe like make a list of what you did and stuff, because I think people would be interested to know, because then if they want to go by that, you know what I mean, like the necessities and stuff, like maybe they didn't think about, but since you went through it, I think that would be a good thing for them to have. And I'd be very interested in that too. I'd definitely be worth trying it, because someone I know, we were actually going through their finances and stuff, and when I was helping her get a budget together, she had 3 kids at the time, and she said that every other week they spent $250 on groceries. So that's $500 a month, or $6,000 a year. And she said easy, and so I said, is there any way that we can get that down? And she's like, I don't think so, but there are always ways to get that kind of a bill down, a grocery bill, especially if you grow your own garden. If you live in town, you can still find, there's plenty of, different avenues you can take to have a garden. So when we were kind of talking about, paying off the small bills first and then, doing the bigger things, I've always kind of thought about that method. Like I said earlier, in my experience, like college days and a little bit after, I wasn't doing that. I was spreading it out. What happened was, Derek and I started going to a couples class at our church, and after on our 1-year anniversary, one of the couples there actually bought us the Dave Ramsey Financial Peace kit, and they said, someone bought this for us on our anniversary, and so we wanted to pay it forward because because it was in the budget for us to do it. So I'm like, oh, okay, so Derek actually has him and I need to do it together. I actually sat down and I read it by myself. And it had a lot of good things. And he basically talks about that, and he calls it the snowball effect, which is, anything extra that you have in a month, you put towards the smallest bill. And then once that's paid off, if it's like $35 a month, then the next higher bill, you add whatever that monthly payment is plus the 35. And then you just keep going until it basically snowballs. But as far as Dave Ramsey, one of his big pointers that I actually follow is having an emergency fund. He talks about 2 different emergency funds, throughout. He has the different steps that you take. So the very first one, you always think that, you want to get out of debt, so you're going to put all your money towards paying off your bills right away. But he actually says that you're supposed to have a $1,000 emergency fund. So when you first look at that, it's a little bit scary because you're like, I don't have any extra money. There's no way I could do that. There's plenty of things that you can, nickel and dime basically to get that started. And the reason why he has that is because if you start automatically paying off your bills and stuff, uh, it's not it's not a question of if something's going to break down, like the washer or your car or anything like that. It's when. So if you have that emergency fund, it helps. And what happened with us is that we had that emergency fund, and our furnace, like something was going on with the furnace. So then he had to call somebody right away, and it ended up being like over $200. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, this is going to be this much. Do we have that?" And I'm like, "Yep." So it was less stress because I knew that we had it. It was there for to help me out with that. So he definitely has a lot of really good steps. And I know that Julianne's also done, like, read through the Dave Ramsey. Did John read through it with you, or?
I don't think John's ever actually read it. What happened with us was that my parents had always lived on an envelope system, and Dave Ramsey, that's kind of his thing, is that you live on a cash basis rather than a checkbook or a credit card, because then if you physically have it in your hand, there's no way to overspend it. And my mom, when I was a kid, was really, really bad with checkbooks. And so they went just to an envelope system of when the check comes in. It gets split up into these different envelopes for these different things. And that way she knew which envelope she was allowed to pull money from, because she is a researcher. She loves to research, and she's really into all these really cool things, but she would forget that there needed to be groceries for the month. And instead she would go buy new books. And so that's why they did that. And so I was raised that way. Again, no credit cards, nothing like that. And so when we got married, it was really, really weird to me because I had all this money. I was working and going to school at the same time. If I wanted to buy something, I would go get an extra job on top of my normal job. And so I had been working seasonal work, and I had all this money saved for school so I could pay cash. And then I decided I wanted a bike. And so I went and got a job at PetSmart because I wasn't going to get into my envelope to buy a bike. That was stupid. That was my rent money. And so if I wanted something, I'd go get an extra job. And so when we got married, John had just kind of made that pact we talked about, where he would pay his tithing, and he got this new job where he was making more than he'd ever made before. He was really committed to not going into debt, but he'd never had a budget. So now you're trying to take two people and bring them together in this financial system. And what we ended up doing in the beginning was that we actually paid different bills, because we didn't want there to be fighting over bills. And so if I pay this bill and you pay that bill, at least there's no confrontation here. And for the first year that we were married, I paid my part of the bills out of my savings, and he thought it was, I asked if we could include all of our money together to have it be in an envelope system, and he was not the least bit interested. But he loves to listen to like Glenn Beck. What's that called? Like talk radio. Mm-hmm. And he loved to listen to Glenn Beck. And one day he heard Dave Ramsey, and he started listening to Dave Ramsey, and he's like, came home, it would be a really great thing if we did this. And I looked at him and I was like, you mean the envelope system? And it was really funny because we had this running joke when we first got married that I had to hear it from a woman and he had to hear it from a man in order for it to be a good idea. And so I think we were about 18 months, 2 years into our marriage when we went to the envelope system. And honestly, he was so good at it that it got to the point that when we started YouTubing and I started to bring in money from what I was doing, I left every single piece of money and all the bills to him, and he was actually squirreling large chunks of money away to put towards our mortgage. And not just towards our mortgage, we were making double mortgage payments, but we were also putting huge amounts of money into savings. And I just totally trusted him so much because he'd become so good with that envelope system that when he lost his job, we could go a year without needing a paycheck from him, and we could go 6 months without having to pay our mortgage.
That is awesome. I can't wait to get to that point. We've already, I feel like every year, like, just as a gardener learns more things, I feel like we learn more things, like, and see, and, it's kind of like different areas are brought to light, where we could save money and stuff. I think we've talked about it before, The Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman.
Hmm.
Derek is quality time, and so he really wants a date night, and right now we definitely can't do a date night, and so there's no going out to eat, there's no reward or anything like that, but really we're more focused towards the reward of how good it's going to feel to get out of debt. And that's a huge thing that has changed also. And so this probably is not the best thing health wise, but Domino's Pizza has like a hot and ready pizza you can get for $5. So for both of us to eat out, quote unquote eat out, while I'm in town, it's not a separate trip into town or anything, I'll go and pick up one of these and we'll sit down and we'll watch a movie and, at home. So we do a lot of, just to kind of have that quality time and stuff like that. So, yeah, there's just, there's so many ways to save, So I was just kind of thinking about a couple of different ways that everybody who's listening might be able to save. And really, when you think about the term, like usually it's used in a bad way, that person is nickeling and diming me. I think everybody understands the concept that you can squeeze money out of somebody by nickels and dimes. Like, but it's the same way for saving money. It all adds up. It's really utilizing your money. And if you really pay attention to where it goes, you should be more aware of where it goes. That's what Dave Ramsey talks about too, which is really awesome. So carpooling. Even a lot of people, everybody knows the concept of carpooling, but when gas is cheaper, like when it's not $4 a gallon, a lot of people will think, oh, well, gas is cheap, it's okay. No, you still do it. It doesn't matter if you save 50 cents because it all adds up, literally. And I actually see this in a lot of my cleaning, is that a lot of people will, they'll say that, oh, we can't go on vacation or we can't do this and that because we don't have any money. But then they'll go buy a nail kit or something because, oh, it was only $5. But if you do that 10 times in a month, that's $50. And then you do that, every single month, that's $60 a year. And, and that's just $5. You know what I mean? If somebody is like, oh, it's only $1 more to do this, or it's only 50 cents, it's, it literally all adds up. So carpooling, shampoo bottles, if you, or anything, lotion or anything that you use, putting them upside down until you get that last drop. Like, I literally will take off the cap and put my finger and like roll it around to get what's left. And then I put water in it and shake it up and get every single drop. I've had some people who will remain nameless, they might be family, who they've had, like an inch left in their shampoo bottle. And if they do that all the time, like, that adds up. It's something, yeah, it's like I said earlier, with it, it's not going to be convenient to do those things. It's going to happen, Recycling. A lot of people don't want to do it because it's very, inconvenient, but it'll actually save room in your trash can. And plus all the benefits of recycling to, I don't know, the world. Using grocery bags as trash can liners instead of going out and buying trash can liners. Gardening. If you're tithing, that is the biggest way to win financially, is because of how much God is going to bless you. But of course, follow Matthew 6:1 and not tell everybody about it. And then, yeah, and just tipping in general. I was a server for 13 years, so naturally I understand everything that goes along with it. But, and I'm not bragging whatsoever. I'm just suggesting if you tip somebody 20%, it's an opportunity to give somebody something and to also God will bless you for it. You know what I mean? Like, that's not why you should do it. Um, but you should do it because I don't know, God made us so wonderful that, for the fact that we actually get an enjoyment when we share and when we do things for other people. Like, it's just, I don't know, if you start doing that, even with if it's like to go or anything like that, like it'll come back, complete. I believe that. So those are some tips I have. Is there anything that?
I guess my mantra is reduce, reuse, and recycle. Like you were saying, the less trash you have in that trash can, the less you have to pay for trash, the more you can compost, the more you can recycle. Um, if you think about it, if it's what, $30 a month to get your trash picked up out in the country, that's a lot of money when you could be pulling your paper out and putting it in your compost pile or using it for mulch. You can, I mean, you can do that with everything but plastic for pretty much. For me, some of the ways that we save a lot of money are to take when we never buy new towels or new washcloths. I take my old beach towels as they wear out and I cut them into squares and I zigzag around the edges to make my own washcloths. I give my girls fabric so that they don't need a lot of toys, my kids. Instead, I give them things that would kind of be considered garbage, I guess. They're fabric scraps or yarn. And instead, I teach them a skill so that in our situation, it's a little bit different because then we have the Etsy store so the girls can put their products up on the Etsy stores that they made out of those scraps and they can make their own money from it. But there's so many different, that is if there was one thing that I was really focused on in life is to take garbage or what would be someone else's garbage and to find a way to bless your own life, because I think when we don't make our own products and we don't make our own goods, we lose the satisfaction of the act. Mm-hmm. If instead we don't care about things that we don't have anything really invested in. So if you're buying really cheap products that were badly made at Walmart, then you don't cherish them because you didn't have an interaction with that object. You don't have memories built into it from having worn it as grandma's, old cardigan or something. And so I think that's really what it's about, is to look around and rather than necessarily taking everything to the thrift store and then picking up something new from the thrift store, maybe investing skills that allow you to recreate things. Like right now, I needed some benches for my Etsy shop room where I create things, and so I took food storage buckets and put a little bit of fabric over the top of it to put my computer on, and some lower buckets and put some fabric on top of them and put my printer on top of it. So instead of spending $40 on a new table, which I had the money to do it, I could have, but we had been having our talk. We'd been having our financial talk, and I'm like, this is a real blessing that Cinnamon and I are talking about this right now, because just because you have the money and you're not in debt, mm-hmm. when you stop planning and stop having the next goal, you reach blah. You reach homeostasis, and you don't want homeostasis. You want to climb to the next level. And if you get complacent because now the money's coming in and you have no debt, it's like, well, why aren't you paying your mortgage off?
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm excited about these talks, is because it's keeping me from being complacent.
Oh, that's awesome. We're going to switch to question for Julianne, question for Cinnamon. So my question for Julianne, when I was meeting with that lady, her name is Joanne. And when she was showing me her garden, she was showing me these pepper plants, and there was a tiny, was it Merriweather or Mary something? They planted something right beside it, and she said that
Marigold.
Marigold. What is that?
It's like they don't look like a carnation. It looks like, well, it kind of looks like a carnation.
I thought it was a weed.
Huh?
I thought it was a weed when I first saw that, because I have something that looks similar to that comes up as a weed. So
they are incredibly good at keeping certain insects out of your garden, and you can also pluck the petals and turn them into a tea that you can put on pink eye, and it cures pink eye. and things like yeast infections and things like that. It's very antifungal.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Well, because I saw that it was right beside, and she's like, "Oh yeah, that's marigold," and I'm just like, "What?" So, does that help with like any kind of plant? Like if you plant it beside?
It's a barrier plant. A lot of people use it as a barrier plant so that you don't have nasties coming into your garden. And I'm not sure, I don't remember if it deflects them because they don't like the smell of it, or if it attracts them so that they're attracted to the marigolds rather than to the rest of the garden. But it's either a buffer or an attractant that kind of holds the nasty bugs' attention. I don't remember which one it is. I think
Okay.
it also keeps nematodes out of your soil, which are the ones that like make your holes in your radishes and your carrots.
Oh, I need to plant some then.
Yeah, they're good things. Okay, so my question for you is, when it comes down to repurposing and being thrifty, when is the point where you cut yourself off and you say no? I cannot be. I there's a line between thrifty and hoarding. Where's that line?
Oh, something you need to think about is space and are you going to use it? Because I always go by, if you're not using it or displaying it, get rid of it. But if you are one of those people who is like, well, I can use all of these things, you have to look at your space. If you don't have the space for it where you're going to be able to utilize it how it's supposed to be, that's when I would draw the line. My mom has this saying where you know, she's not a hoarder, but she does hold on to a lot of things that have purpose. And she's like, everybody gives me a hard time, but when you guys need something, guess who you come to? And it's very, very true. But if that stuff ever gets into the way of even of how you're living, how you're moving around, how you're doing your daily stuff, if that stuff is getting into the way and making it hard where you have to kind of walk around it, or you have to, if you have way too much stuff that you have to move like 2 or 3 things to get to it, then it's not set up efficiently. It's too much stuff. And you really have to kind of look at, if you're being thrifty and doing something just, for the purpose of repurposing it, but you're not going to use it a lot, I don't know. I guess it would kind of go by base, because there's certain stuff that you don't use all year round, but when you do need it, you need it. You know what I mean? So I guess you kind of have to take a full-on inventory of what you have and look at what kind of space you have, if that makes sense.
It totally does. We had our talk the other day about this kind of thing, and I looked at how many things my daughter had to move in order to get to her stool that she likes to draw on when she's in my crafting room. And I'm like, well, no wonder I'm frustrated with my kids coming into my room. And I don't want to feel frustration when I see my kids enter my room. What if instead I got rid of all this redundant crap that's blocking them from being able to come in and enjoy time with me? And so that's what I thought. I'm like, what would Cinnamon do?
If you're
Oh,
having a lot
Cinnamon
of
would get rid of that stuff.
well, okay, if you are in your craft room and you're having a lot of wall space and that kind of stuff, and you have a lot of stuff in your craft room that you are going to use, utilize your wall space, utilize your closets, and I could do a whole segment about closets, but I'll give just a small tip. The reason why it's hard for people to clear out their closets and stuff is because when they look at them, they're like, where am I going to put all this stuff? But what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to clear it all out and set it up to, whichever shelf is the easiest to get to. That's the stuff that you use all the time. You know what I mean? And then the stuff, like in our main closet, all the way at the very top, that's where we keep our humidifier because we only need it during the winter, because the air gets so dry. So it's just how it's going to be set up and stuff. So I see some wall space. You could, build a shelf or build something and if it's stuff for you, you can put it up higher. If it's stuff for the kids, have it lower, but not, in a space on the wall where they're going to bump into it or anything like that. So definitely closets and shelves, those will help you. But if it's something that you could live without, you can live without it.
Right, right.
if you guys want to help support the podcast, you guys can donate through Patreon. Definitely Financial Peace University by Dave Ramsey. It will change your life. It has changed so many people's lives, and I literally mean that.
And it's an easy read too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, all right. Let me think what I was going to say. I totally had it. See, this is what happens when you don't write things down. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and that you guys are able to take away any kind of advice that will give you guys some peace of mind.
Hi, Pig.
Thank you.
We'll see you later. What do you think?
That was pretty good.
I thought it was fantastic. That was the kind of thing that I just love to listen to personally.